My hair looks really awful, but I found one of my favourite headbands, and guess where it was? It was in the headband drawer. The reason why I couldn't find it is because I've got hundreds of headbands in the headband drawer. But anyway, I found it. And my hair looks awful. But anyway, I want to talk about actually something quite serious because I saw a clip from Andrew Tate where he was saying why Europe is basically overrun with migrants, why it's falling apart, why you walk around London or Birmingham or Manchester and you just feel like you're in the Middle East. You know, there are loads of places in both London and Birmingham and Manchester as well now, where you feel like you're in the Middle East, and everyone's, you know, I don't like the veiling of women. I just feel it's stupid. I feel like, why would you wear that? You know, there is a nice badminton place that I've been going to, and there's two Chinese people there, or people from China, and they're nice, you know, they wear normal clothes, and then there's some people that show up that are fully veiled, and I don't understand how they can do it because it's so hot. And yeah, playing badminton in a full veil, not in a face veil. They weren't wearing face veils, but in a full. Two of them wore plain black. I've only seen three of them. But two of them wore but plain black, and then the other one had a nice watermelon sort of dress. But yeah, it was hot. It was very very hot, and I don't understand how you can play sports whilst dressed like that. I felt hot, and I was just wearing I was wearing leggings because I was trying to like look a bit. I know Muslim people show up, so I feel a little bit uncomfortable wearing skimpy shorts in front of them. But yeah, I was wearing skinny leggings, and I just felt so hot. But yes, I don't understand the whole why people would want to cover up and stuff, because to me it's just it's a bit silly, and I don't really agree with it, and I'm seeing it all over the place, and it just feels like it is getting taken over by England. Is no longer England. You know, I was born in 87, so you might argue that I don't really remember the 90s, and it's true that I don't remember my life as the 90s, but I know that I always felt like an adult even when I was still a child, and I remember like the world and how it was. You know, I remember being brought up in a sort of first world country and feeling quite privileged that I'm in a first world country, and it did feel like there was a whole bunch of rich people that were trying to help the first world country, and you know they were thinking these are the people we like, these are the people, you know, I felt like the wealthy back then knew that there was sort of the third world countries of people who don't have many skills, who can't do much, who have to just have a basic repetitive job because that's pretty much what they're best at, and they're not very good at thinking outside the box. You know, I know there's a lot of these people in England too. I was seeing that more and more as I grew older, but I felt like there was a separation. You know, the first world countries are where you want to live, and the third world countries were where you don't want to live. And something Andrew Tate said about the rich, things are changing now. The rich, you know, when it comes to his view on men being this and women being this, and his misogyny and his you know, there's so many things that he says that I just do not agree with at all. But occasionally he does say some things, and I'm just like, you know, I think there's truth to that, and I think that's right. And he was saying that the globalists, or the people with huge amount of wealth, so much wealth that they can just say, all right, I'm going to leave a country and I'm going to go somewhere else. And you know, these people are moving to the third world countries, or the second world, or just not the third world, but just they're moving to places that are nice, but where the governments treat them better, e.g. don't just take all their tax away. And I feel like they're doing this strategically because they realize that there's obviously a growth in stupidity. It is what it is. I would say it's a growth in stupidity. You know, there's a lot of people who believe in equality, and they think that migrants should live anywhere. There's no such thing as an illegal immigrant, because they've you know, if the world is the world, and if you're born here, you should have just as much right to live here as the people. You know, there's a lot of people that believe this, and total equality. For me, I see these people as people who can't tell the difference between an intelligent soul and a dumb soul. You know, if you think that equality is the same, you're basically saying that someone who is living their first life as a human has just as much potential, just as much ability to become, you know, an intelligent person. You know, if they were just if that soul just happened to be born into a billionaire's family, family, they would be just the same as the billionaires, and just as smart. They're just, there's some people who generally believe that there's no such thing as a soul, or maybe there is a soul, but it's just your soul just lives once in a body and that's it goes off to heaven. This is a lot of things that believe. This is a belief that lives in all sorts of religions, that you only have one life, and therefore if you take someone from Africa and you give them a much better life, much better education, they'd be exactly the same. And okay, there's a little bit of truth to that, because if you have a better education, you'll be brought up much proper, you'll be brought up to believe the things around you. But if the only reason why you are believing the things around you is because you look up to the things around you, then are you really intelligent, or are you just someone who's just copying the things around you, and you're not actually thinking for yourself? You're just acting like a kind of a robot that's been fed information. If you're fed if you're living your first life and you're fed Western information, like my mum, I believe she's living her first life as a human, and if you're just fed the Western she won't believe in covering and veils and stuff. But I know if my mum was born to an Islamic family, she would grow up believing all the Islamic things, because it would be all part of her upbringing programming. And people who are living their first life are very, very adaptable and acceptable to the things that they learn in that one life. And therefore there are some people that if whether they are born in this family or this family, the whole world view would completely change based on their upbringing. But there are a lot of people who are living their 10th life or 14th life. And I think if these people happen to be put inside the body of an Islamic person, they'd probably happily be killed for their, but if they were forced to wear a veil, and in your past life that you were actually a highly intelligent male that did so much, and now what, you're being told that you don't have any rights, and you have to force, I'm sure these people would be glad to want to die just to get out of this horrible arrangement that they're now in, and I think the camera's really acting up, and it's not, I don't know what's going on with my camera, but it's not working properly these days. But yeah, there is I'm wondering if I should buy a new camera, because this one doesn't seem to be working well. But there's a lot of people that have these wrong views, and they think that if someone worships Allah and someone worships God the Father, their views are equally valid, equally the same. Everyone has the rights to someone, and I think in the past, in the 90s, there was this sort of strong belief that maybe this is the truth, because it's part of the Christianity belief. You get one life and that's it, and therefore there have been a lot of people who believed in even the super wealthy would have believed this. They would have believed that all religions have truth to it, including Islam, and they wouldn't have realized that actually God is female and she hates Islam, and Islam is basically everything that she doesn't agree with. Even the idea, I didn't know that Muslims hated dogs. That's something new that I've just found out now. Is it the truth, or has it just been added into the religion now? I don't know, but I've heard that Muslims believe that dogs are dirty and that you shouldn't. So there's some sort of, they're banned from strong religious Islamic groups or societies, and I find that strange. I'll ask Paris if she thinks her dogs are dirty. I'm pretty sure she would 100% disagree with that, and that's how I feel. And I think if you knew that Islam was based on a bunch of principles, a root cause of things that I absolutely hate, you would understand why God wouldn't want to help these people, and why they're always going to end up causing terrorism, and because it's part of their beliefs, but forcing people to believe via force. And okay, they won't tell you that it's this, because they'll see you as an infidel. If you don't agree with their beliefs, they'll tell you all the things that you want to hear, and they won't tell you the truth about it. And if you're being blind and just thinking, oh, God's not real, or if God's real, God made all these different religions for a different reason. And yeah, I did make all these different religions for a different reason, but Islam is actually the one that I least agree with, and therefore if these Islamic groups turn to terrorism and murder for stupid reasons, it is because the root of Islam is just things that I hate, and if them doing horrible things is going to make people want to leave Islam and not want to support it, not want to back it up, not want to wear hair coverings for all the people that have died because of showing a bit of hair or something. If these people want to stand against this religion, then I'm very much for them. And I think in the 90s people didn't know that, but at the same time So people didn't know that, hence they kept giving Islam full respect, but they also had the division of, we actually prefer the Western world, we actually prefer this sort of the people who don't just want to dump chewing gum everywhere and don't just want to graffiti. So even though graffiti happened, it was far less. Like, I remember growing up in the 90s, and okay, there was graffiti has been everywhere, but it was more in the bad areas. And I think people worked harder to make the society, make the world a better place. And I feel like the elites, the people that were controlling this, saw this division. First world is best, second world is better, is middle, and then third world is worse, and we can take advantage of them, get them to work for nothing, and make lots of money by selling to the people that have money, whilst also creating this division between first world, second world, and third world. And now I don't feel like this is happening now I feel like there's a massive change, because I feel like it's what I'm saying. I don't know who's watching my videos, but I do believe that the elites or people at the top know what I'm saying. They know I'm Christ. They know I'm not Jesus. They know I'm not God the Father. They know I hate this religion because there's so many lies in it, and the world was not made in 6 days, and God did not make the universe, and there's so many things in it that I don't agree with. And I think now that they've heard this, they are realizing that the first world, the people in the first world are not necessarily the people that I actually like. They're people that, again, are just believing lies. They probably are the older souls. They probably are people who've been reincarnated more, hence why they don't believe in Islam. If you are a 12-year-old forced to marry a 70-year-old, or if you're forced to marry a cousin that you don't even like, you're going to fall away from Islam. You're going to hate Islam, and there is a sort of hatred of Islam within a lot of Western nations. And this is because a lot of these people have actually faced Islam and were forced to be Islam 1,000 years ago when it first created. Maybe there's a lot of bloodshed, and this is where the hatred for Islam has come from. But if you're an unevolved soul, you won't realize that, and you'll think there's nothing wrong with Islam. The number of people that support Palestine and yet have no clue that Palestinians or Gaza would actually kill gay people. They're supporting it, and yet they don't realize the crimes and the actions that they actually do, because they're too busy believing in equality, and they're too busy thinking that there's just as much people in Israel are just as nice as the people in Gaza, when in reality the people in Israel can work with Muslims, the people in Islam work with gay people, and it's a safe haven for gays in there, whereas the people in Palestine don't support equality, don't support this. But a lot of people are just like, they're just mad. Everyone's equal. We'll forget about all the Yemens that the Israeli, I didn't even heard about the Yemens and what happened to. I heard a lot of Muslim Islamic people killed lots of Yemens. I haven't even heard of any of this. Why are people not talking about it? I don't know. Maybe they're not talking about it because part of this killing is to do with depopulation, and they know it needs to happen, and this is why it hasn't. But because Christians like to focus on Israel because they believe that Israel is some sort of special thing. It's me, so there is something special about the name, but it's not actually related to the group. But yeah, I think there's a lot of unspiritual people in the first world countries, and they're supporting of this Israel is terrible, whilst ignoring how terrible some of the people in Gaza actually are, and what Hamas have allegedly done to people, forcing them to eat their own kidney or something. I've heard of things like this. Now I don't know if it's true or not, and I'm not saying it's true because I don't know. I haven't seen it with my own eyes, but I've heard this stuff. And if you're someone that supports Palestine, maybe you're just someone who hasn't heard of this. Maybe you're someone who's not interested in this stuff. And and I think because of all the things that I'm saying, the supreme leaders at the top are looking at the first world countries and are no longer in favor of it, and they're thinking, well, there's so many people in these first world countries that just don't seem to be able to tell the truth. So why are we helping build up these first world nations and give them the best life, the better life, and turn the first world countries into slaves so that we can make lots of products cheaply? Why do that when we now have machines? We can make machines to do all our sewing. We can make machines to do all our crop growing and stuff. And this doesn't involve suffering, because the machines don't suffer, and they can work harder, and they don't complain, and they don't cause problems like wanting to attack you back and stuff. And then therefore they're I think, even though they're expensive to make, but you can make more of it if it's the machine that's doing the whole thing. That's what mass production is all about. Packaging lots of packaging Skittles or things like that just really, really quickly. Why get workers to do that when they're just going to be miserable, sad, they're probably going to have injury, they're probably going to sue the company, and I think the laws in the first world countries are actually not paying attention to the wealthy ones. I mean, you could be a McDonald's could be sued for billions of pounds, or £15 million for someone who's just downed a hugely boiling cup of coffee. You know, most people who realize that this is hot know that sometimes McDonald's do a bit too hot, and then they sip it, but before they don't just guzzle it down like a moron and then afterwards expect to have 15 million pounds, you know, more money than they could ever make in their whole life, all because they guzzle down something. And okay, they might have some problems because of it, they might have a scar on their leg, but to think that they've now going to be having a much better life, they're now going to live in a sort of a mansion. You know, the number of people in poor countries who would be willing to chop their leg off only just to say that this was done through something they couldn't control, only then to try and use this money to try and make a couple of thousand off the government or something. The number of people that would do that is actually fairly high, and therefore a lot of these people, when they come to England, they have bad morals, and they might think, okay, you know what, I know this is too hot, I'm going to guzzle it down, burn myself, sue the company, and because the laws are not helping the super rich, they're actually allowing the super rich to have their money drained by people that just don't deserve it. You know, there's a lot of people as well who bought a house for next to nothing, and now this house that they bought for next to nothing is £1 million. They're living all happy and nice because they could just sell their house, go buy a cheaper house, and then live off the £500,000 that they made for doing absolutely nothing other than just sitting in a house. You know, that they're becoming wealthy through things that aren't intelligent, through things that they don't deserve. They don't deserve to have, my parents don't deserve to have £1 million house when I can't afford it. Okay, I'm a little bit different because I haven't properly worked and I couldn't get a job. If I wasn't God, I probably would have had a normal job. I probably would. I don't know if I'd be able to afford to live in Hampstead, but if I was earning 40,000 a year, you know, I probably would be able to. I probably would have been able to afford to stay in London if I was a normal person. But I couldn't get a job. I couldn't get a mortgage. I couldn't get anything because everyone's just ignoring me. So I know my situation is different. But I know there are plenty of people who are working really hard, who are quite smart, and who don't deserve to have to spend their whole life just working to pay off a mortgage. And therefore, you know, and there's stupid people who become incredibly wealthy just because they marry the right person who's rich, and you know, there's so many stupid people who are living really good lives in the first world countries that they don't appreciate it, they're not happy, they're promoting Jesus as the truth because they generally believe that he is the only way to save them, even though his only real promise is that you can get into heaven afterwards, and they're just worshipping him for the belief that their life is going to be so much better after they die, when they're just ignoring all the fact that there's so many people in worse situations than them, and their life is heaven in comparison to them. And you know, I think because of this, the super elite are seeing people in the first world countries as being less nice, less kind, less honest. You know, there's a lot of lies. Lying is a big problem. There is a lot of liars in every country all over the world. But you know, if these people in the first world country that you're helping are starting to attack you by wanting to sue you for millions of pounds so they can live a big, nice, wealthy life, a life that they would have never had if they didn't have guzzled down that extremely hot coffee, you know, it's just, people need to take responsibility for their own actions, and I don't believe the laws are trying to help justice on whether or not someone is intelligent and actually deserves money. I think they're just helping anyone, and this is just angering the people above them, because I feel like there's so many, because of equality, there's so many people who can get into government, have all the wrong beliefs, all the false, a bunch of things that just believe a bunch of things that just aren't true, and they're not wise, they're not making the best decisions, they just think everyone's equal. And then I think there might also be a lot of people who are from Islamic countries and they want to get into government just so they can try it. There seems to be a lot of mayors in England who are Islamic and barely speak English. I mean, was that one that barely spoke English, who was supposed to be the mayor of Brighton, I thought that was, I didn't think there was many Muslims in Brighton. So to think that the mayor of Islam, the mayor of Brighton doesn't even speak English that well. Like I don't even know if that clip's true or not. I mean, I suppose I could look it up, but Yes, I can't be bothered to look it up. I'm hearing all sorts of, there's lots of mayors all over England that are Islamic, and Islam is not supposed to be that strong. So why are all these Islamic people getting into power? I mean, are they only getting in power because they want to help their Islamic brothers to also get into better positions and stuff? And if that's the truth, are the people in government aware of this sort of takeover that is happening? And if they're making it illegal to have to say that there's a takeover happening in Europe of sort of Islamic beliefs and traditions and Middle Eastern culture and you know, migrants, there's lots of different types of migrants, so I don't want to insult migrants, but I do insult Islamic migrants and people who can't speak the language. I don't want to move to a country if I can't speak the language, and because I'm dyslexic, I can't speak any other language other than English. I'm even struggling to speak English, so I wouldn't want to move to a country that doesn't speak English as a first language for that reason. But if there are people who don't speak the language that they're moving to, and yet they have no ability or no desire to want to learn that language, I think that's a really bad sign for, you know, they don't belong there. And if the government is allowing all these people to stay on the belief that they have equal rights to be here, and you know, is I don't know, but I know that it's a lot easier to take advantage of people with money than people that don't have money. If people don't have money, you can just take advantage of them by getting them to work long hours for next to nothing. But if you take advantage of people who have lots of money yet are stupid and don't deserve this money, then the bankers creating this false housing market using huge amounts of loans that they give out to people, providing that they pay this interest, providing there's a deposit. So if they do repossess the house, they'll have a big chunk of money that they can just take, because they can say, well, you haven't been paying the mortgage for the last year, so this money actually belongs to us. In fact, because you broke our agreement, we could actually take all of the money. You know, I don't agree with it if it's nice people. I don't agree with it if these people are people who look after their garden, people who care about, you know, the lady in my house is not doing the mowing again. I reminded her quite a lot last year, or a few times last year and the year before, but this time I feel like I'm just giving up. When she got the garden mowed, it did actually look very nice, so I'm confident that if she did get it properly done, it does go back to normal. But yeah, she hasn't mowed it the whole of this year, and it's now just a big cornfield. But it doesn't look nice, you know. It doesn't look nice for the area. It doesn't look nice, and I don't want that. And you know, how you look after the property is very important. And you know, I don't want people who can't look after properties to move here. But if there is some sort of goal, which is just to you know, to crash the housing market through this rapture belief, this belief that you can get into another world and live in a much better place, you just need to do A, B, and C and then die. You know, if that's going to happen, then the housing market is going to half, and if the housing market halves, the rental market will also half, and if the rental market also halves, then people aren't going to be able to pay off these hugely large debts, and if they sell the house, they might find that the house only sells for half the amount, and if the mortgage that is on it is just less than half. So say if you buy something for 400,000 and you got a 200,000 pound mortgage on it, you know, if the housing market halves, the mortgage company are going to repossess the house, and they're going to say, well, there is nothing left because the market has dropped, and therefore the 200,000 that you put into the house, or the 100,000 that you put into the house, that's all gone, and we owe you nothing because we're not selling the house for the same amount. You know, if there's a big housing market collapse, and the goal of it is to trick lots of people into having these big mortgages because they spiritually can't tell the future, they spiritually don't know that this collapse is about to happen. You know, I think it's fine if you own a 400,000 pound house and the market collapses and it's now worth, you know, 200,000. That's fine, because you don't have a massive mortgage to pay, you don't have massive interests and commitments to pay on it. But if you do have massive interests and monthly, like if you have to pay the bank £2,000 a year just to be able to keep this house, but if you find that the rent has dropped and now the rent can no longer be sold for more than £1,000 a month, you're not going to be able to ever pay back this mortgage, and you're going to find that the house is going to be repossessed. And I don't agree that this is a right or a nice thing if you're a nice person, if you've just fallen for this trap, you know. But if you're someone who really just doesn't care, then I don't feel like I should care about you, and therefore I feel like this is a prophecy of something that is going to happen. There's going to be a massive collapse, and I think it's going to affect the people who the banks want to rip off, and the exploitation has happened in the poor countries for a very long time. But if the richer countries are the people that have the money, then it's going to be far more tempting to want to exploit the richer countries. And I think this could be partly why they are allowing so many immigrants in. The more immigrants they allow in, okay, they might not be able to find jobs, but they might be able to find jobs. And if they can find jobs, then all they need is 3 months of paycheck and some savings. Just because you're an immigrant, that doesn't mean you don't have £50,000 savings. I mean, it probably does, but it might not. If you spend the next 2 years working and paying off this mortgage as well, you might find that the deposit that you've put in plus the money you've put in to try and pay back to pay back the loan, it might end up being like 100,000, and that's quite a lot of money. So the rich are going to want to exploit that. I don't know. It's a big monopoly game, and I think a lot of people might be hurt by it, but I know that there's a lot of people who I feel hurt by, and therefore it's hard to care.